Hello, everybody, and welcome to this week's episode of Our Lives. And today we are joined by Heledd Wyn, a partner at Rothley Law, and she's here to talk about the very glamorous subject of lasting power of attorney. Many of us, we're getting to a certain age now when bits of us stop working. We may need additional support with our health, or more likely, we're supporting loved ones, maybe parents, aunts, uncles, grandparents, around their health and finances. So I'm going to introduce Heledd now. Heledd, thank you for joining us.
Hi, thanks for having me on board.
What is lasting power of attorney? It sounds very grand. What does it actually mean in real terms?
Okay, so they start they start off as bits of paper, which doesn't sound very exciting, but they're actually incredibly important documents. They're incredibly important documents where an individual who decides that they want to choose somebody to delegate decision making for them in the future, who that might be, they can choose somebody to do that for them. And there's two types. There's one for property and financial affairs, and one for health and care decisions.
Okay, who needs lasting power of attorney? Now, I know you and I are both on a little bit of a mission to raise awareness across the world. We're such good fun at parties. It's like, have you got lasting power of attorney? And it's something that I say it as a phrase more often than any normal person would in a week. Who needs it? Who needs one of
Everyone,
these? Everyone.
everyone needs one.
And when do we need one, Helen? When do we need lasting power of attorney?
Now.
Now.
Yeah. Okay. So it sounds a bit flippant. I would say anybody who's an adult, so over the age of 18, who is going to be going through life having financial things happen to them. So bank accounts, mortgages, pensions, rental, all sorts of things. If something happens to you and you cannot make those decisions yourself, or you cannot tell the bank or the building society or whoever what to do, then you need somebody in place to make those decisions. If you're injured and you're unable to articulate what you would like your treatment to look like, you really want to be having somebody there who can make those decisions for you.
Okay, I think for me, having worked in social care for 20 years plus postage and packaging, people don't like to think about bad things happening. Living in the moment, we think we're going to be healthy forever. When the reality is, and again, lots of fun at parties, things are going to happen. It's inevitable. Um, so who can you choose to be your attorney? Who do you ask?
Yeah, I completely agree. It's that it'll never happen to me thing, and I don't want to think about it because it's miserable. And yeah, do you know what? It is tough thinking about these things, and these conversations are difficult. But choosing people to be your attorney can take an awful lot of heat out of scenarios.
Definitely.
So, who can you choose? Anybody sensible. Anybody sensible
Anybody sensible.
who's going to be.
Some of
Um,
us might struggle with that, Heleth. Some of us might struggle with finding somebody sensible.
yeah. So, rule of thumb is it's family, friends, or professionals, or a combination, depending on individual circumstances, what's appropriate. But it's understanding that whoever you've chosen needs to know what they're doing and needs to understand what they're doing and understand what they can and can't do.
Okay, so let's talk, for example, around financial lasting power of attorney. So I've nominated someone. I'm not sure who I'm going to nominate because my kids won't answer the door unless they know who it is. So I'm not sure they're going to be making those big decisions. Um, does that mean then they just have control over your finances from the point where they've signed that document? Do you lose your ability to manage your own finances at that point, or how does it work?
Absolutely not. So the power of attorney form, when you're drawing it up, there is an option to put in there. It can only be used when you lose mental capacity. But a lot of people say, actually, I want the freedom to decide when I want my attorneys to step in and make decisions for me. So it's not an automatic, that's it, you've handed it over, it's no longer yours. It's collaborative. It's when are you looking at being used. So I might sit there and go, do you know what, I really can't face phoning up the gas board and having a conversation and sitting on hold for 45 minutes to just work out what's going on with my bill. So I'm going to get my attorney to do that because quite frankly they can. I'm happy with that. So I've
And
delegated that.
and if for no other reason, that's a great reason to have somebody else on there, is so that you don't have to do those things. So
Yeah.
it's a huge selling point for me.
Exactly. Just get somebody else to do all the rubbish jobs. So, at that point, I would have, say, delegated that decision and go, can you go and do this? You have my authority. If I, it's always an extreme example, but it's a useful one. If I was in a coma, I obviously wouldn't be able to have any sort of conversation with anybody. So at that point, my attorney would would be stepping in to make decisions on my behalf in my best interests. And I think, it's an important but possibly, misunderstood and overlooked legal point, is that whilst I have capacity, I am delegating that decision to somebody. It is only when I've lost capacity does my attorney step into my shoes completely without me having input.
So, just for any listeners out there or any of our followers who don't understand what is capacity in legal terms.
Okay, so mental capacities is a legal framework, and there is a Mental Capacity Act, which sets out what people are deemed to have and capacities do or not. And it's brilliant because it says you can have capacity to do some things and not other things, and it's not a on-off switch. It's not a binary thing. It's not a that's it, you've got a bit forgetful. You can't make any decisions about anything ever again. It's all to do with, right, you must be supported to make decisions. You've got to be have a look at what decisions you're making. So you might really struggle with the concept of managing, a portfolio of investments because it's a lot of money.
Yeah.
It's quite complicated. You're dealing with people, you don't know, or perhaps technology you're not familiar with, and that's quite hard. And you might be deemed not to have the capacity to do that. But you're perfectly capable of understanding where you want to live, what you want for breakfast, whether you prefer tea or coffee. So it's a huge sliding scale. It's a spectrum, as are most things.
I think that's really reassuring because I think when I speak to people about power of attorney, it's people always feel like they're going to lose complete control over the decisions that are very important to them in their lives, and that's absolutely not the case, is it? Like you said, it's a sliding scale. Um, how do you go about raising the conversation with somebody around power of attorney?
I'm quite fortunate because I do it in the day job, because people have sort of come into the office and said, I possibly need
Yeah,
to sort my life out. So they've already made that commitment to come in and have a chat.
yeah.
So I can then go, great. So let me talk to you about it. And this is why they're a good idea. This is why I think they might suit you. Let's talk about what it means for you and your attorneys. And my role is very much about giving a huge amount of advice around drawing up power of attorney. As I said at the beginning, they are bits of paper ultimately. You will get a bit of paper that is a power of attorney, but there's so much more to it than that. There's so much more to the document, which is understanding what it means and does and how it operates.
Yeah. I think that can feel quite scary to people as well. It's going into something that they don't quite understand. It's like when I'm the world's worst. I shouldn't admit this, but when it says read terms and conditions and click here to accept. Accept. There you
Yeah.
go. I don't think I've ever read a term, and it always comes back and bites me on the bum at some point. So, top tip there. It's really going to see a professional so you really understand the ins and outs of what you're getting yourself into. Um, what happens if you don't have a power of attorney for finances and you do lose capacity or you're incapacitated in some way? For example, you use the example of a coma. I generally use the hit by a bus example when I'm talking to people. What happens then if somebody doesn't have that in place?
So if there isn't a power of attorney in place and life still goes on, direct debits still go out of bank accounts, mortgage payments still get made, money still needs to be paid, bills need to be paid. If there is nobody to manage those finances, then the only option is to apply to the court to get somebody appointed as a deputy, because quite rightly, the banks should not be letting anybody just come in and start
Taking your money
accessing
out.
bank accounts. Exactly, because you could be anybody. So without that power of attorney, the only alternative is to have that court order.
Okay. What protections are in place? And I'm thinking there's been a case recently, professionals, but also, and again, this is one of my favourite programs, 24 hours in police custody, where where somebody was actually taking, they think they took £200,000 out of their uncle's bank account, which it was an eye-watering amount of money. What protections are in place and to protect the people whose finances are covered by this?
So this is really, really hot topic, as you say. It's a
Yes.
really
We
tough
love a hot
one. We
topic.
love a hot topic. Um, so the law is in place. The law says if you are an attorney, this is what you can and cannot do. Um, there are things you are allowed to do. There are things you are not allowed to do. And taking somebody's money without their consent is called theft.
Yep. No trips to the Bahamas on granddad's
No,
pension.
it's not your money. It is not your money. But there's this massive misconception around like, well, hang on, it's what mum would have wanted, or it's what she just said I could do. And it's like, yeah, but it's still not your money. It's still your mum's money. Just because
Yep.
she doesn't know how to manage it doesn't mean it automatically becomes yours.
No.
And unfortunately, we're just seeing the cases of financial abuse,
Yes.
uh, theft, going up and up and up and up. And I think, the powers of attorney have to be registered at the Office of the Public Guardian before they can get used. I think in the last year there was 1.37 million registered.
Wow.
That's a huge number of powers of attorneys, a huge number of people out
It
there
is.
with these bits of paper.
Is
And
it enough though, Heleth? Is it enough people with that? We want to see more.
we need to see more people with it, but also I think the lag now is the safeguarding
Safeguarding
behind
to
that,
keep up.
to keep up with that supervision, that oversight, that just because you can access your mum's bank account doesn't mean you can now, as you say, go to the Bahamas or pay for your conservatory. It's not your money.
No. Okay. So in terms of, so that kind of sort of covers some of the financial areas. What about with healthcare? What kind of decisions are people able to make? And I think this is a really interesting one for me because it's actually having the ability to have those conversations with your friends and family about your wishes as well.
Yeah. So it's huge. Again, so slightly different with the health and care power of attorney. It can only be used when you've lost capacity. So there is that point, because up to the point where you still have capacity, you're the one making the decision. It's your body.
Yeah.
So quite right, yeah. On that occasion, I am like, there is this hard line. You have to be deemed not to have capacity to make your own decisions.
And who is able to deem you as not having capacity?
So it's you it's a bit fluid, because you might you might be starting to have a conversation with somebody going, oh, I'm not sure this is quite right, I'm not convinced this person has capacity. Sometimes it's obvious, the coma bit or being hit by a bus is pretty obvious.
Yes, fairly
You're
obvious.
unconscious,
Yep.
very obvious. It's then you have to get a formal capacity assessment, and I would always say, let's get professionals in, let's get a doctor in, let's get an independent social worker in, let's get mental health nurse in, depending on why this person maybe
Yep.
lack capacity. Let's get somebody who specializes in that area to give them the best chance of saying that they have capacity. But if they don't, then we know somebody who's really on it in this area has said this person doesn't have capacity. So at
Yep.
that point, we know then you're making the decisions. So really, at that point, when you've someone has lost capacity and you are making decisions about health, then you've got somebody saying, okay, what treatment should this person be receiving, or what the treatment should this person be refused or refusing? Where should they be living? What is in their best interest? And it always comes down to best interest. What is going to be the best possible outcome for this person who has lost capacity? And this is where having the conversation early is really helpful, because what I might consider to be in my best interest might not be what my attorneys think. And actually, they have to do what I would have wanted. And if they don't know what I'd have wanted, they are second guessing.
Yes.
Otherwise, if I've told them, even better, written it down, then
Yes.
they know what I'd want. And you might say, look, I don't want treatment. And there's a section in the power attorney form for health where it says, I let my attorneys refuse life sustaining treatment. And a lot of people think, oh, that's just CPR. But actually, it could be you refuse antibiotics, you refuse blood transfusions, you refuse chemotherapy, radiotherapy. For a lot of people who get some things like sepsis,
Yep.
don't have antibiotics, you're not going to live very long. But that
No.
if that's somebody's choice, that's their choice, and that's absolutely fine. So it's what's important to you.
I think this is really key as well. And what we're trying to do with this podcast is really encourage people to start having some of those perhaps uncomfortable conversations, because it's not, hey, guess what? If I get sepsis or I'm in a coma or I get hit by a bus anytime in the near future, this is what I want, because we don't like to talk about it. But I think the sort of wishes and having them written down, I think that's so key, Helen, is getting someone to write them down, because I honestly can't remember what I had for breakfast yesterday. So somebody telling me something, no matter how important it is, that doesn't mean to say it's stuck there. So having that written down, um, and using that as a basis for these conversations is really important. What happens if you don't have a power of attorney for health? Does it automatically, the decision making, go to your next of kin? If there's a sibling group and they're all squabbling, because siblings are well known for all getting on famously in times of
Mm.
crisis, what happens then if this isn't in place?
So this is where it gets trickier again, because
Okay.
the what is it? I talked about the finance one. Finance, lack of parity for finance. The court will step in and you'll have a deputy. The court is much more reluctant to step in and put in a deputy for finance, so for health, than it is for
Okay.
finance. The reason being because they're kind of like, well, a, you had the option to do a power of attorney
Yeah.
when you didn't, and you chose not to, so you can't have been that bothered. So it's not for
Fair
us to be
point.
that it's not be for us to be that paternalistic. We're not keen on being that paternalistic and interventionist. It is then a decision is made in best interests. And what on earth is best interests? And this is where you get huge discrepancies in family views, in medical
Yeah.
views, in social care views. At this point, I always tend to refer back to the case of Briggs. It's a case a few years ago, and Paul Briggs was he was ex-army, ex-police, and he was on his motorbike going to work, and he got knocked off his bike, knocked off a motorbike by somebody driving the wrong side of the road, and he got airlifted to hospital, and he was patched up. I think is probably the most sort of
Okay.
easy, kindest way of saying it. Um, and his wife, his mum, his sister all said he'd hated this. Please turn him off. Please
Yeah.
turn off the life support. We don't want him living this life. There's no way he'd have wanted this. He's always told us he wouldn't have wanted this.
Yeah.
The um, hospital trust care board at the time said, we're not convinced that's the right answer because we think, because although he's in a coma, he is responding to certain stimuli because we can see that from the machinery that he's tied up to. And they went head to head and they went to court. And
Okay.
the family went, but he's our son, husband, brother,
Yeah.
father to little girl who's struggling with this. This isn't right. And the care board said, yeah, but we're not happy to just switch him off because that's not the right decision. He's not so out of it on the Glasgow coma scale that he's not responding. And it's a really wonderful judgment. And the judge goes, look, if you'd had a power of attorney or an advanced decision, we wouldn't be having this conversation. But we are, and now we're going to listen to both sides. And on this occasion, they did say, look, switch him off. There's enough evidence to say this is the right thing. But can you
Yeah.
imagine the trauma and the
Oh,
difficulty and the stress of having to go to court anyway, and then in these
unbelievable.
circumstances?
And having to, and I mean, I can't imagine that from the family's viewpoint, is having to fight to have somebody's life support switched off, which
Yeah,
is so counterintuitive and and that must have been so painful in and of itself. I think the moral of the story is, kids, get power of attorney, because
yeah,
it avoids these situations.
yeah,
And I know that I would be very in that situation where I wouldn't want to live a particular way, and so that's something that I need to get done, to have down, because I don't want that decision being made by some faceless people on a health board. Is the reality, but that is the default mode. That's what will happen if there's a conflict in deciding what's in the person's best interests.
yeah. There's an awful lot of people who will get involved, and they will
And
have
all,
to look at things in the round, and that might not be what you would have wanted. You might have been horrified that that was the outcome. But if you haven't put anything in place,
is this what people refer to when they talk about a living will? Because that's a term that's bandied around a lot, and I think there's a lot of confusion around all the different legal terms, what people
Yeah.
say, like a DNR. If you have a DNR tattooed on your belly button or something, that that'll suffice, so nobody will try and resuscitate you. That doesn't mean to say they won't give you life-saving treatment, though. So I think there's a few myths there that we can sort of look at and look to
Yeah, yeah.
dispel.
So living will um, is probably more properly called an advanced decision, and
Yeah.
it can often be called an advanced decision to refuse treatment, which is again perhaps a bit more descriptive.
Yeah.
um, and it's a legally binding document, and it is you have written it, and you have signed it, and you have witnessed it, and it is lodged with the doctors and the hospital and in your handbag and on the staples to the back of your front door. Because guess what? Think about this: paramedics could have come in and rescue you. They're going to go into the front door and they're going to take you out the same way.
They
So if
are.
they know,
They are.
if there is an advanced decision on the back door, they'll do it.
It's a great talking point for when you invite new neighbours over, isn't it? And you've got your advanced decision pinned to your front door,
Yeah,
just for reference.
yeah.
But maybe that should be commonplace. Maybe this is what we should advocate for: is people having advanced directives on their front door.
Well, I mean, there's a great I think so. To still do it. They used to do it. Is the British Lions? I think used to do
The
a message in a
bottles,
bottle.
yeah,
Yeah, and a little sticker on the back door on your door, and they go, I'll go and see. There's something in the fridge because everybody's got a fridge. Go in the fridge, and
yeah,
then you get your important info in the fridge. So,
yeah,
I love it.
fantastic.
Such a
They
great
seem to have
idea.
disappeared a little bit, don't they? Maybe we should bring them back. This can be our campaign to bring those back, because actually they're there, they're written down, and they're next to your milk,
Yeah.
so they're easy to find from people. So that's it. So tattooing DNR on your chest or around your belly button is not going to be a legally binding.
Not in and of itself, but I know
Okay,
people have like Medi bracelets, and they
okay,
say, "Look, I've got a Medi bracelet," and I know people wear it. They've got things like diabetes and things like that,
yeah.
and actually, this is what I've got. This is why I've passed out. Um, Actually, if you've got a Medi bracelet with, I've got a advanced decision. It's where is it?
Where is it?
It's actually no good if it's just stuff in the back of the cupboard. It needs to be with the hospital, with the doctors. The medical profession needs to know it exists.
So it's no good being written on the back of a napkin
No,
in the drawer that everybody has in their kitchen that's full of
yeah.
everything known to man. So that's no good, because I did see a case a while back when somebody's will was actually written on the back of, was it a frozen fish packet or something really random like that? So
But I mean, being slightly cynical at this point, you go, well, wills are only dealing with money after somebody's died.
yes,
So it's a completely different ball game to
yeah.
something that is dealing with you and your health and your care and your welfare in the here and now.
So fish finger packets, okay for wills, probably
Yeah.
not promoted, but okay for wills. Definitely not okay for stuff like this.
Yeah, please don't. Please
Please
do it
don't.
in a way that's slightly more official, because then it'll carry that weight that it needs to.
How do you go about getting them into the hospitals? Because anyone, and forgive me, all of our healthcare professionals out there, we do love you dearly. How do you get this information to the hospitals? Can you rock up and hand it into a receptionist? Do you do it via GP? How do you get the healthcare professionals that you would need to see this document? How do you get this document in their possession?
So it is a case of, get, if you've done one, take it to the GP, get the
Yeah,
GP to put it on your records. If you're going into hospital for a planned emergency, take it with you.
yeah.
If it's an emergency, make sure that your
It's on
person,
the front
or
door.
it's on your front door, somebody knows where it is to go and find it.
Yeah. Okay. Right. So I think we've covered sort of the healthcare lasting power of attorney. So does this also cover sort of, you mentioned before, deciding where you live? Now this is a really, really hot topic. Again, we do love our hot topics here. Is going into the cost of care. Now this is a whole other episode that I hope you're going to come back and do with us.
Yeah.
Oh, because this one we could talk about this for days and days.
Days.
Um, I work with carers and paid carers and so on and so forth, and there's quite often a reluctance, even though sometimes it would be in someone's best interest to go into residential care, but the family are afraid of losing the home. Does power of attorney come into play that at all, or is that just, please stop talking about this, let's do a whole other episode on it?
Let's do a whole episode on that one because
Yeah.
yeah, it's massive. I mean, care fee funding is huge, and I think all I would say at this point is effectively, very broadly, three ways of paying for care. The NHS pays for it, social care pays for it, or the individual pays for it. There's
Yes.
broadly your three pots.
That is a whole other episode because
It's a whole
just on
episode.
continuing healthcare alone, we could probably
Yeah.
span two entire episodes. So, okay, I'm going to ask you a slightly off-topic question now, just as one that's of interest to me. Just to say to our listeners that we will be putting all of Hella's details in the show notes, contact details, and you're very active on LinkedIn, my favourite creator on there, it has to be said. Um, what question do people ask you when they find out that you are a lawyer or solicitor? You must get asked some very random questions.
Oh, it's either can you help me in my divorce or will you come and get me out of the police station? Like, yeah, if you want to file in a cake, it's about my limits.
Do you lie about your job to people just for the sake of peace and quiet? Do you just sometimes make something up?
I have been known at parties to say I work in a factory that makes pink wafer biscuits because I think
Fantastic.
it's just a bit more fun in it.
It it certainly is, and I'm sure there's a lot less follow up questions, although I couldn't be sure.
There are, yeah.
There are. Definitely. Thank you so much for joining us today, Helen. I do hope you're going to come back and talk about the wonderful world of paying for care.
Happy to.
Um, and your details will go in the show notes, and we'll hope to see you back soon. Thank you very much for joining us today.
Thank you.